Today we're finally going to be discussing the next round of main characters and what their canon teams would be like if they were to appear in a main series game. Last time we talked about Ethans, as well as look back at Reds, the only main character that's appeared in other Pokemon games, just to try and better figure out what a realistic team for other main characters would look like. However, for this video we're going to be spicing things up a bit. As you can tell from the title, we're going to be looking at both Brenden and May this time. Hoenn's the first games to start off the generations with a male and female option right from the get-go, so it seems fitting to include them both for this video, with each gender appearing as an exclusive battle for whichever of the current games you're playing at the time. It really wouldn't matter which, so for example, you can have May appear as a battle in Shining Pearl and Brenden in Brilliant Diamond, and you can continue this for future games. Also, we'll be using the remakes for their team building, just because these are the most relevant games they've appeared in, with each character representing one of these versions, as Oras was also the games to introduce the concept of alternate universes, which was even further expanded on in Ultra Sun and Moon, where we even meet versions of the villain leaders like Archie and Maxie who succeeded in their plans, most likely due to the main characters Brenden or May just flat out not existing in those timelines. So it's pretty safe to assume that both Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire happened, they're just alternate timelines of each other. We even have the quote-unquote villain organization who are technically good guys in the opposite games, suggesting that in an alternate timeline they could have been the villains, which they in fact are. So because Game Freak introduced this new aspect of the Pokeverse to us, it gives us a lot more room to play around and have more fun with how we go about this. Now, my question to you before we get into this video is that while yes, most of their team will be the same, there will be some major differences towards the end based on certain Pokemon. But can you guess who that'll be and which genders go and represent which game? With that thought aside, let's get into the heart of this video. First up is one of the 3 starter Pokemon. Which one? Well, honestly, the answer is it doesn't really matter. If we're going with the idea that these teams are for them as super bosses for a future title, the best way would be for their starter to be the one super effective against the starter type you picked in that particular game. So if you were to pick Infernape, they'd have a Swampert. Empoleon, then they'd be throwing out a Sceptile, and so on. The next one might be a bit of a controversial one, but hear me out. It's the contest Pikachu you get from a breeder after competing at your first Pokemon contest in Slateport City. If you're playing as Brenden, you'd be given Rockstar Pikachu, which will know Meteor Mash, and if you're playing as May, you'll be given Popstar Pikachu, which will know Draining Kiss. Weirdly enough, the cosplay Pikachu, while initially being dependent on the gender of your MC, will always be female. I thought that was kind of interesting. You can switch up their costumes after the fact, but these are the matching versions for your character's outfits when they go up on stage. Now, having a Pokemon that's not only a gift, but representing Pokemon contests for a Hoenn MC is kind of perfect. These are the games that introduce Pokemon contests after all, which is a whole nother beast entirely. To say it's just a minigame is an understatement. Each of the moves is reworked to have different stats and effects, with the overall objective being completely different from normal battles. Heck, even in the Hoenn anime, the heroine of the show's goal was to try to be a contest champion. There were episodes upon episodes purely dedicated to contest competitions. So Game Freak clearly were trying to push these. In fact, kinda shocked we never got a full-fledged spin-off game where you're a coordinator. It seemed like a surefire thing at the time, but I guess not. One of the first few things that come to mind when you think of Hoenn are probably the contests. For better or for worse, I mean, I personally never cared for them, nor have I met a single person that did, but you can't deny the fact that them having a Pokemon that represents contests would be pretty appropriate for their team. So third up is a gift Pokemon you can't find anywhere else in the game, Castform. You get this little guy from a researcher after defeating either Team Magma or Aqua at the Weather Institution. The element of weather plays a pretty big role in Hoenn, as a legendary trio of these games' abilities and lore is tied to their power to change the weather drastically. So what better Pokemon to represent one of the overall themes of Hoenn than one that changes forms based on the weather conditions of the game? This one I feel like didn't need too much of an explanation, so now we're going to backtrack just a bit and talk about that key Pokemon I was alluding to earlier. I mostly left this for 4th just because I didn't want to spoil which gender got which game too early in the video, but it's the Eon Pokemons Latios and Latias. Before dealing with the Weather Institution situation, you encounter Steven and one of the Eon Pokemon. You're then taken to Southern Island to deal with the version's evil organization from attacking the other Eon Pokemon. Afterwards, the one that you rescued will join your team. If you're playing Omega Ruby, you'll get Latios, and if you're playing Alpha Sapphire, you'll get Latias. And I mean, it's kinda obvious which one's gonna get which at this point. Just like with the contest Pikachus, I think it'll make the most sense if the male protagonist got the male Eon Pokemon, and the female. So with that, we now know who represents which game. as well as kinda spoiling who gets what legendary later too. But we still got one more slot before that, and this is going to be the Snorlax slash Sudowoodo of these games, Kecleon. You are forced to battle this Pokemon in order to continue down Route 120, and aside from it being a mandatory battle, there's really not much else to say about this guy. It was one of the first few Hoenn Pokemon introduced in the anime, debuting all the way back in the Johto League, but aside from that, it's just the obstacle Pokemon of this game with a cool little gimmick. With that, we're at the final Pokemon for their respective teams, the mascot legendaries. Unlike in Generation 1 and 2, where the legendaries were for the most part completely optional, in these games you have no choice but to face off against these Pokemon, which I kinda got mixed feelings on, but I feel like that's a topic for a different video. So since the Eon Pokemon determined which version each of the main characters would belong to, that means Brenden would get Primal Groudon while May gets Primal Kyogre as their final Pokemon. Some might say that giving them a legendary with 680 plus base stats might be a bit much for them, but we've seen Game Freak give legendaries to trainers before. In Ultra Sun and Moon, we've seen these very Pokemon being used by an alternate Archie and Maxie. So Game Freak's shown that legendaries aren't off the table for trainers to use if it makes sense. Also, Hops has a legendary in his post-game of Sword and Shield as a super boss, so again, it wouldn't be the first time. This is why I feel like if they were to appear in a game, a double battle would be the ideal way to face against them. Not only was it introduced in Hoenn and probably the #1 thing people associate with it, aside from contests and most likely the surfing theme, it also balanced out the fact that 2 of their Pokemon would be legendaries. As one of the main reasons why the official style of battling in Pokemon tournaments is double, is that a single Pokemon becomes a lot less of a threat when in theory, you can target it down with 2 Pokemon. There's more to it obviously, but also this way they could play around with their legendary's ability to control the weather, and would give their cast form a little boost in power as well. So there you go, what I think a potential final team for them would look like. It's definitely a mixed bag for sure. You got weak little guys like Kecleon and Castform, along with powerhouses like either of the Latis and one of the 3 weather trios. But to me, it just balances things out is all. Now this little end part is just something I wanted to add to these videos, one where I give them an alternate team that I'd personally want them to have. Not going by how Game Freak made Red's team or trying to come up with a realistic one, but rather what I would do if I had complete freedom. Aside from obviously having to be Pokemon from the regional decks in those particular games they were in. Interestingly enough, I didn't realize this till after I made them, but they're not going to be that much different. First, you would still face them in a double battle, just now they would dedicate themselves to a full-fledged weather team, with the leads being their respective primal legendary and a cast form. Whoever uses Kyogre would have cast form, the Alpha Sapphire exclusive Pokemon Ludicolo with Swift Swim, as well as Rain Dance holding a Damp Rock, Armaldo with Swift Swim, with either a Mega Sceptile for Lightning Rod or Mega Swampert with Swift Swim, if you just want to make the team ridiculously fast. With whoever having Primal Groudon would also have cast form, the Omega Ruby exclusive Pokemon Shiftry with Chlorophyll, the other fossil Pokemon Cradily with Storm Drain holding a Heat Rock and knowing Sunny Day, and either Mega Blaziken for the boost in fire type attacks in the sun, or Mega Sceptile for free solar beams, as well as being a good counter for anti-sun teams. With both of their final members being one of the Eon Pokemon, since usually it's a good idea to have at least one Pokemon that isn't necessarily tied to the weather, in case the battle's going south. These teams, like the ones earlier, not only take advantage of Pokemon's gimmick of each version having exclusive Pokemon, but also unique Pokemon like the fossils, where you're only able to pick one of the 2 in a single playthrough. The former teams definitely seem like a much more realistic one that Game Freak would actually make for them, but I figured I'd throw this in at the end and see what you guys think. You can even consider the latter team as something they would use for a rematch battle, as it's definitely a much more brutal lineup. With that, what would you guys have their teams be? With that, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked the video, share it around, show some love by throwing a like, and if you want to stick around, hit that subscribe button. I got a couple more Pokemon videos, so check it out if you got the time.